We're going to speak in English. Is that okay with everybody? Or do we need translation at all? Yes. Mataji, this is just for the question and answers. Okay.
Does everybody understand English? Everybody can't see. Hare Krishna. Now are we live? Can you hear me? Yes. Everybody can hear me in the back? Everybody's okay with English? Yes? So today we're going to be, can we turn the projector off? So today we're going to be looking at what are 4 key factors in transmitting the culture and values and practice of Krishna consciousness to children. So I think you'll very quickly see that these principles apply not only to raising children, but also in general to dealing with devotees. Now, I got these principles, first of all, by studying Srila Prabhupada's instructions. And I think you're going to have a sheet of Srila Prabhupada's quotes on this matter, a printout coming for you. If that does not arrive, you can find it on my website, urmiladevidasi.org, under the seminars handouts, and transmitting the culture of Krishna consciousness to our children. So if the handout doesn't come, I'm not quite sure why it didn't make it, but somehow it didn't make it. So you can go to my website, urmiladevidasi.org, and if you look at seminars and workshops, and you'll look at handouts, so seminars and workshops, handouts, and I don't remember the exact title, but something about transmitting the culture of Krishna consciousness. And you can find the quotes there. If any of you are online now, you can pull that document up on your phone. So we looked at these quotes from Srila Prabhupada, and then also research. On the doctoral level, I did research into young adults, people who were in their 20s and 30s, who had been brought up in Krishna consciousness, and what was it that made them decide that they wanted to be members of ISKCON? What is it that made them decide that they wanted to practice Krishna consciousness? And I also looked at research in other religions. What made people decide to be a religious person? What made people decide to follow the faith and culture of their family? So putting that together, a study of Srila Prabhupada's instructions on dealing with children, the research that I did on people born into the movement, and the research on other people in other religions, people in religions in general, we came up with these 4 very powerful keys. And these 4 keys are so powerful and so effective that even having one of them is likely to help somebody make the decision to practice Krishna consciousness in their life. And these 4 keys are so powerful that they operate even in an environment that is not ideal. So if you don't have a devotee school, or your spouse is not a devotee, or some difficulty, still even having just one of them is often enough so that people will decide, yes, I would like to take up Krishna consciousness. So because these 4 things apply in the transmission of culture in general, I'd like to start by asking, so what influenced you growing up to take up the culture and the values that you have today?
My parents influenced me.
Okay. What else? So we're just going to put family, otherwise we'll say grandparents, uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters, cousins. Okay, some others?
Watching others being positive.
Watching others being positive? Or were those two separate things?
I mean, it is combined or
Okay, if being positive, what did you mean by that?
you put intentions and you look at others and
they are being positive and we have a good feeling watching them.
Okay, so what I think you're saying, and I want to get this right because I have a feeling that it's very important. So what I think you're saying is watching others who are happy and positive.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, some more.
How beautiful Krishna is.
Oh. I've been teaching this class, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, and no one's ever said that. Anybody else? There's a lot more. I'm sure there's a lot more. Yes?
Community.
Community.
Some of my teachers' willingness to engage with me.
Teachers what?
Willingness to engage with me.
Willingness to engage with you. I like that. Thank you. Yes?
Religious places like temples and
Yes.
When I was helped or when I was given those values, the way they were given to me in a loving and caring way, that really helped me.
festivals.
Happy devotees, seeing they following Krishna consciousness nicely, we were very happy to follow it.
Is this watching others who are happy and positive? Same thing? Okay. Books and prasadam. If any of you have a phone, could you take it out of your pocket right now and put it on vibrate, please? If you don't know how to do that, ask the person next to you how to do that. Any other ideas? What helped you to develop your values? And yes?
Selfless nature of the devotees.
Okay.
Selfless.
So you were inspired by it or what?
Service attitude of the devotees, selflessness.
Okay. Yes.
Melodious kirtan.
Okay.
Lifestyle of devotees. The lifestyle of devotees.
Purity of Srila Prabhupada. Purity of Srila Prabhupada.
Okay, it looks like we've got 3 out of the 4. So you'll notice that there's a lot of people mentioning other people, right? As probably about half of these, or 3/4 of them, have to do with other people. Now, if somebody had asked me 40 years ago, what's the best way to teach your children Krishna consciousness? What's the best way to transmit the culture and values and lifestyle, etc. of Krishna consciousness to others? I would have said example and habit. I really felt that example was the key thing. But I think that the value and the efficacy of example is not as strong or as dominant as it used to be. So if you think about going back, 50, 60 years in the world, at that time, people lived in smaller communities, and there wasn't so much communication or travel between one community and another, isn't it? I mean, when I was a child, if we were going to get news from Europe, it would take a couple weeks to come over. When I first flew across the Atlantic, it was in a propeller plane. My sister had moved overseas. We had no way to call her on the telephone. A letter would take a month, and we got a tape recorder. We got an identical tape recorder at our home and her home, and we would make recordings and mail it to her. Aha, we have our printout. You're a good someone. Thank you so much. If you want a soft copy of this, it is on the website. So anyway, we had to make a recording. We'll get to that sheet in a minute. You don't need it right this minute. We had to make a recording. We would send it overseas. She would listen to it. Then she and her husband would make a recording and send it back. Right? If you wanted to find that information, you had a physical encyclopedia in your house, or you had to drive or walk to a library. And so basically, children grew up seeing the examples of their families and their communities, which were generally pretty much in harmony. That you pretty much saw the same examples all around you, and you didn't see very many contrary examples. You didn't even know that they existed. So it was very easy then, by example and habit, for people to take up the values and the culture and the lifestyles of their families and their communities. But such is not the case now in 2018. So, I used to tell people, if you don't want your children to be so influenced by outside culture, go in your living room, find the big box, look in the back, follow the cord to the wall, pull it out, and throw the box out the window. But now everybody has a little box in their pocket. It's not so simple. And now if you think that you're going to keep your children from being exposed to varieties of cultures and ideologies from a young age, you are in an illusion. Even if you go to the Himalayas, that's not going to be possible. So your children are going to be exposed to a wide variety of examples, a wide variety of philosophies, ideologies, and habits. And your own example and the example of your own family and the example of the immediate devotee community will not be sufficient. It's still important. It's not that it's not important, but it's no longer going to be the main factor. So let's think for a minute, with our relationships with other people, what kind of relationships do we have with other people where we voluntarily mold our character, our values, and our behaviors for those other people? What's the nature of those relationships where we do that? Where there's where there's love involved, yes, definitely. Definitely. There's people who train animals have found that very young animals cannot be trained through punishment. They can only be trained through affection. And they've concluded that a living being is much more trained, much more wired, you could say, to please rather than obey. So yes, well, there's relationships of love, and we would say love and trust. Why love and trust? Well, if somebody loves me, but they don't know what they're doing, then they may inadvertently mislead me. And if they know what they're doing, but they don't love me, they may use their knowledge intentionally to mislead me. So I will follow people where I am convinced that they actually know what they're doing, they know what they're saying, and also that they genuinely care about me. Do you need something? Do you need to tell somebody something? Is there a problem? Is that going to another city, or what's happening with this? Your own internal post system, or has it gotten to where it needs to go? It hasn't. Where is it supposed to go? We don't know the name. Where is it supposed to go?
They wanted to switch off the AC.
No, if you switch off the AC, we're all going to die. It'll be so stuffy in here. I just can't have it blowing right on me. But no, if you switch, there's no windows here. There's no circulation. You don't have a choice about having the AC on. But thank you for thinking of me. That was very considerate. So relationships of love and, I mean, I don't mind. It's just that if I stand right here, then it's kind of a blast of cold air. So relationships of love and trust. What other situations do we mold ourselves because of somebody else? Yes.
Need.
What?
Need.
Need. In times of need. That means somebody has power over us. Okay, now if somebody has power over you, and you have some kind of need, under what circumstances will you try to please that person? When that person is what? If somebody has power over you, you'll try to please them when they are what? Humble. Well, they have power over you, yeah. When they're there. When they're there.
Yeah.
So if someone has power over you, you will try to please them when they are there. And as soon as they're not there, you'll do whatever you want. Isn't it? So like governments, if they try to control people through power, that's not possible, because there's always more citizens than government. So governments that try to control people through power use fear. They try to give you the impression that you're being watched all the time, that they're always there. They'll make you afraid that your relatives and your neighbors are spying on you, right? But even in those situations, as soon as the government loses its power, even if it takes 3 or 4 generations, people will go back to doing what they want to do. It doesn't make a permanent change in the citizenry. Okay, and another, did you have another thought about what other kind of people we follow?
We follow people if we feel like we're serving a greater need.
Something greater. We feel some inspiration, isn't it? Is that what you meant?
So for example, if we're serving in the army, we'll mold ourselves to fit that because we feel like we're doing something greater than ourselves.
Okay, I like that answer. So we'll change our values if we feel like it's for some higher cause, isn't it? Yeah. That I don't think is so much though related to people. That's going to be related to my third point. So I like your point, but that's not so much people. because I'm not really molding myself because of my sergeant or my captain or my lieutenant, but it's more due to a concept. So that is a really important point, and we'll get to there, and that's the one thing that's missing actually from what you came up with. But is there any other kind of person, any other relationship we have with a person that where we end up molding ourselves? Yes.
If I know that you are right and you are well-wisher of me and you are doing this for my welfare.
That's love and trust. I know you're right and you're my well-wisher. So you just express love and trust in other language. I know that you're right and you're my well-wisher. That is the love, the trust and love. Yes. Yes.
Mataji, in case of selfless, like for a mother, to train his child, she will mold herself to the degree she can. To
No, the mother is not changing her values and her character like that. It's not like that. And if she is, it's because of love again.
To be accepted at times?
That's power. I feel someone has some sort of power over me. Some kind of reward or punishment, maybe a subtle one. The other one is inspiration. So a number of you mentioned, like say Srila Prabhupada's purity is inspiring you. You may not feel, it's not that Srila Prabhupada is right there with you personally, but you feel inspired. So people will often change their character, their values, their behavior for someone they don't know personally, for someone who doesn't have a personal relationship with them. Sometimes it's a movie star or an athlete or something that's inspiring them. So that also is the case. But generally, the personal relationship is stronger. So I always like to tell the story of how from the time I was 2 until I went to college when I was 17, that every morning from about 5:30 for about 2 hours, my father would spend time with me. And he would tell me stories, he would play games with me, he would make my breakfast. That doesn't mean he cooked, he never cooked. But he would make orange juice. You've seen the street vendors where they have like this press for orange juice? We had one of those. And he would, maybe toast bread or something like that. But he would prepare something for me to eat, and he would spend time with me. And because of him doing that, every single morning, we developed a very close relationship. Now, my father was a very busy man. He was the CEO of an international company. He was also a temple president. Now, is this still, did somebody turn this off? Did somebody actually turn this off? Is this one at least still on? Okay. So he was also a temple president, not of a Hare Krishna temple, but in other words, he was a very busy person. And still he found time for me every day for a couple hours. Now, in contrast, my mother wouldn't wake up until 10 o'clock in the morning. And the kind of things my mother did with me was she would take me to very educational things for my own good. But she didn't really spend time with me just as a person. And so I never developed that kind of relationship with my mother. Now, from the time I was very young, at least 3 years old, my father would tell me not to smoke. Now, it's about cigarettes causing cancer. That didn't exist. There were cigarette commercials on television. When I was in secondary school, I'd say 90% of the students smoked. People would smoke everywhere and anywhere, which is not true today. And I really believe that the only reason I didn't smoke was that my father didn't want me to, and I didn't want to disappoint him. It wasn't that I was convinced about cancer or something like that. I didn't want to hurt my father. And when I decided to join ISKCON, my father was very supportive. He immediately said, "I'm so glad you're looking for God. I wish you'd do it in our own religion, but what's important is that you're looking for God." My mother was not supportive. In fact, she was hysterical for about 10 years. But although I loved my mother, I wasn't willing to change my whole life because of her feeling. If my father had not been supportive, I don't know if I could have joined. It was really, really important to me to make him happy. When Srila Prabhupada gave me Gayatri initiation, my father gave Prabhupada a check for life membership, And Prabhupada said, good father, good daughter. Huh? So I never wanted to do anything to displease him, and I always wanted to please him because there was this relationship of love and trust. So we are going to follow people where there's love and trust. It's just natural. All of us should have at least somebody in Krishna consciousness that we have this kind of relationship with. It's not a question of an official title. It's not, I am the mother, therefore, I am the father, I am the teacher, I am the temple president, I am the guru. But what is the nature of the relationship? So if you look at your sheet, you'll notice that Srila Prabhupada speaks about this. He talks about that why does the brahmachari follow the guru? It says there must be a relationship of love. Otherwise, why would you put yourself under the control of another person? We also have the quote there where Prabhupada says, our society should be based on love and trust. The Nectar of Instruction, Srila Prabhupada says that the purpose of the Krishna consciousness movement is to facilitate the 6 loving exchanges between the devotees. If our children don't have a relationship of love and trust with other devotees, they'll end up having that relationship with somebody. And whoever they have these kinds of relationships with, they will tend to mold themselves according to those relationships. So our first key is relationships of love and trust. Can we all say that? Relationships of love and trust. Now, if that's all there is, that can often be enough for a person to feel, yes, I really want to dedicate myself to Krishna consciousness. Now, the next one, a number of you mentioned, though not so much. I usually get it a little bit more. We got it in the television and the books. And yeah, that's about all. Generally, I get people bringing out more examples of this. So one very important way of transmitting culture and values is through stories. Now, if we think about it, the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad-Gita are all stories, yes? All the philosophy is in the context of a story, and quite a story. I mean, Bhagavad-Gita is a very dramatic story. The Bhagavatam also, Maharaj Pariksit is going to die in 7 days, and then all these even dramatic stories within that. The Bhagavatam has stories within stories within stories, many layers of stories. So why are stories so effective? Well, first of all, we enjoy them. People like stories. We like stories because Krishna likes stories. Krishna's whole Leela, what does Leela mean? It means stories. And not only does Krishna like being in stories, he likes hearing stories. So we hear from the Goswamis that in the spiritual world, that every evening Krishna and his friends are listening to stories and watching dramas of Krishna's incarnations. And when Krishna goes to bed at night, Mother Yasoda tells him stories about Ramchandra, about Nrsingadev. Rupa Goswami says when Krishna goes to the forest, Mother Yasoda puts a Nrsinga Kavacha on his wrist and says, you know, if there's any big demons, just pray to Nrsingadev and he'll protect you. And Rupa Goswami says that Krishna starts to smile. And he says, may his suppressed smile bless you all. But the point is, Krishna likes to hear stories. Lord Chaitanya would like to hear the stories of Prahlad and Dhruva. Krishna likes to hear our stories. In fact, he's probably the only one who really does. Right? Try telling your stories to other people and see their attention spans. But Krishna, Iswara Sarvabhutanam Hrideshi Arjunatistati, he's in our heart, and he's actually listening. He's interested. He's listening to our thoughts. He's interested in our stories. So first of all, we like stories. And second of all, stories bypass the false ego. We're much more receptive. So who here is completely, absolutely, 100% honest all the time? Anybody? That's too bad. I I mean, now suppose that I were to say to you, well, that's really terrible. You know, you should be honest. What's wrong with you? Devotees are supposed to be honest. Why aren't you honest? What do you do immediately? You put up your shield, right? Right? Was that effective? Do you feel inspired? Anybody felt inspired by that? It's funny though, we often do that to other people. It never inspires us. I don't know any time that inspires me. But we'll do that to, you should do this, and the only thing the other person does is put up a shield. They may go, no? But suppose I tell you a story. Now, I'm sure you've all heard this story before. There was this little boy, and his job was to watch the sheep. And watching sheep is really boring. You know, if people want to go to sleep, they think about sheep. So this boy's watching the sheep. 1 sheep, 5 sheep, 20 sheep. I thought, I want some excitement in my life. So he runs in the village and he says, a wolf, there's a wolf. And so the people from the village come up with their weapons and they look around and they don't see any wolf prints, they don't see any wolf stool, and they think, you know, you sure there was a wolf? Oh, I saw a wolf. There was a wolf. So they go back to the village and the boy said, that was fun. And a couple weeks go by and he's watching the sheep. He's so bored. So again he runs in the village. He says, there's a wolf, there's a wolf. This time maybe 2/3 of the villagers come with their weapons and they look even more closely. And they don't see any wolf prints. They don't see any signs of a wolf. And they're like, are you sure? Oh, I'm sure. I even heard him howling. So they go back. And then maybe a month goes by and the boy again, he's really bored. So again he runs into the village. He said, there's a wolf, there's a wolf. And this time only about 3 people come. And they look for a long time. They don't see any signs. And you all know what happens, right? A couple days later, a real wolf comes. And he comes in the village and goes, there's a wolf, there's a wolf. And nobody comes. So what'd you do when you were hearing that story? Nobody had a defense up, right? And you even all knew that story. Wasn't even something fresh. And everybody was attentive, seeing everybody's faces. People are... Before everybody was like this. Why? Because it's not about me. It's about some sheep and a wolf and a boy, you know. So we open up our receptivity. We open our doors. Huh? We let it come in. We let down our guard. Now also, brain research shows that when we are watching, listening, reading, hearing a story, our brain goes in alpha waves. Alpha waves is what the brain goes into in a trance. So it actually physiologically, stories put us in a brain state where we are more susceptible. We're less questioning of what's coming in. We're not analyzing it so much. Whereas with direct instruction, we're thinking, is that right? I'm not sure. Do I really want to do that? Now, I'm sure you also know that when you watch, read, hear, whatever, a story, that you end up taking on some of the emotions of the characters, isn't it? Right? The character's in danger and your heart's beating and you're sweating. And the character wins some money or wins the girl and you're happy. Right? Although your own bank account is the same, right? So we identify with the characters, we feel their emotions. And again, in brain research, when athletes want to prepare, they can also prepare mentally. So if an athlete, they're not actually on the court swinging the ball, just in their mind, they're imagining swinging the ball, that their muscles and their nerves react about 2/3 as much as when they're actually there. And you know, ourselves too. If I'm going to do something, I may prepare for it mentally, isn't it? I may rehearse it mentally. So what happens when we hear or read or listen to a story, it's as if we're practicing whatever the characters are doing in the story. So if we're reading a story about people who are Krishna conscious, people who have high morals, who have high ethics, it's like we're practicing that ourselves. And if we read stories or hear or watch stories about people who are cruel and selfish and irreligious, then we're practicing that. And so therefore stories very much form our character. You can see in the quotes there, Srila Prabhupada talks about how traditionally that every evening people would gather to hear Mahabharata and Ramayana. Now in the evening, people gather to watch the television, isn't it? But it's a similar idea. And if we think about how has materialistic culture spread all over the world, it's spread through the media. And what is the media? It's primarily stories. Even music is primarily a kind of a story, isn't it? Yes? Most songs are telling a story. Even most commercials, most advertisements tell a very short story, isn't it? Yes? There was a soda, like I don't know which one, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, whatever. They made this billboard, this advertisement. So over here there was this man or woman, I don't know, probably man, who was very like, you know, tired and sad. And then over here he was drinking the soda, and over here he was happy. That was the little story. But they found out that when they put up this billboard in the Arabic countries, their sales went down. Did you get that? Anybody figure that out? Yeah, they read it backwards. Right? So in the Arabic countries, it looked like someone's happy, and they drink the soda, and then they're sad. But the point is, it was a little story. Huh? So most commercials, of course, TV shows, movies, even music, is in the form of stories. And stories can change the values and the beliefs of a whole culture. So when I was growing up, everyone pretty much in society was believing that science and technology was going to save the world. There was one company, I don't remember what they were selling, but they would advertise better living through chemistry. I remember there was a TV show I watched as a child. People travel in outer space, and the computer synthesizes food. And we thought, this is wonderful. We won't need agriculture anymore. You know, just make chemical food. We thought this would be a wonderful, wonderful thing. We thought that antibiotics and vaccines were going to cure all diseases. Pretty soon we were going to live on the moon. And it was just starting when I was a teenager, some understanding that maybe science and technology had a dark side. And maybe it was polluting the planet. Just starting when I was like 14, 15. I remember, you know, I went on a protest march, but that was considered very antisocial. And now things have completely reversed. Now the mood in the world is we should be taking care of the earth, we should be taking care of the environment. So why is that? The switch happened because of stories. Especially Rachel Carson, she wrote a book, Silent Spring, and it was about how the pesticides were weakening the eggshells of the birds so that the baby birds would die. And we would wake up in the morning in the springtime and there would be no birds. So it was these kind of stories that changed people's mentality. So that's a positive example. On a negative example is abortion. So again, when I was young, abortion was illegal all over the world. Now, abortion is legal practically everywhere. That did not change because of facts. People did not change their views about abortion because of facts. If you say, you know, is it okay to burn the little babies up in the womb with salt water or cut them into little pieces, who is going to agree with this? But if you tell a story, oh, there's some 13-year-old girl and she was raped, and she had an illegal abortion, and she got an infection, and she died, and oh, terrible. We should make abortion legal. You understand? It was through these kind of stories. I mean, someone just sent me a story like this the other day about abortion. It was very moving. You know, this woman who finds out, I mean, she was married, she wanted the baby, and she found out that the baby had no brain, and she thought, oh, you know, I don't want to carry this baby to term. She won't have a happy life. And so she had an abortion. And she's describing how, you know, the baby was actually born alive, and she's cuddling with this little baby, but it was, you know, so early that it died. And oh, she was so heartbroken. And I'm thinking, but you killed your baby. But the way the story was written, you got sympathy for the mother and father. You understand? And you were thinking, oh, this was a choice they made out of love and out of concern for the poor child. It was very difficult to read that story and be against abortion. It was extremely difficult. So these kind of stories change people's views. And we can think of a number of examples. We're not going to give them all now. But we can think of a number of examples of how the values, the culture, the behavior of not just individuals, but an entire society can be shifted 180 degrees through stories in ways that would not happen otherwise. So we can think about what stories are our children being exposed to. Now, I know of one family that they pretty much stopped practicing Krishna consciousness, but all 4 of their children became devotees. I think 2 of them have taken initiation. And when I talked to the children, they said the reason they dedicated themselves to Krishna consciousness is that the only practice their parents continued, I think they were still vegetarian, but they weren't doing any other sadhana at all, was that every night when the children would go to bed, they would play them recordings of Krishna's stories. And they said just from hearing these stories of Krishna every evening, they became attracted, like Rasmay said, Krishna's beauty. So they became attracted to Krishna and decided to dedicate themselves to Krishna. So we should be spending time with our children, telling them stories of Krishna, his devotees, and stories of people who exemplify the kind of characters and cultures and behaviors that we would like our children to imbibe. And being very careful about their exposure to stories that are going to inculcate in them a different set of values and behavior. Now, we're not going to be able to give them devotional stories entirely. Certainly, okay, all of you have a phone. Can you please take it out of your pocket and put it on vibrate? Unless you're expecting a call from Modi, in which case you should probably just wait outside. If you haven't put your phone on vibrate, would you please take out your phone and put it on vibrate? Okay. So we can give our children only stories about Krishna until they're about 5. There's no need to give them other stories when they're very young. First of all, 2- and 3-year-old children are very happy to read the same book 1,000 times, isn't it? They have no problem with this at all. I was showing a devotional book to my 3-year-old granddaughter. So we read the book, and as soon as we finished the book, she said, again. And we read the book. Can you put your phone on vibrate, Prabhu? Prabhu, you with the blue shirt just walking in. Yes, you. Can you put your phone on vibrate, please? Thank you. At the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education, if your phone rings during the class, you have to buy everybody a samosa. And they really make you do it too. I mean, they don't just say it. So anyway, she kept saying again, again, again. Yeah? So for the little children, just, you don't even need to have 100 books, you know? But once they start to go to school, once they learn how to read, Srila Prabhupada actually desired that our children be reading and studying the classic books, the important books of culture in general. He didn't want our children to be known as fools. He wanted our children to be able to function in the world. So from the point of view of their service, they need to read other books. And in any case, we just don't have enough reading material for them to only be reading the kind of books that are the most enlightening. So we have also on our website, also on the same URMILADevidasi.org, in the section Free Educational Materials, I believe it's under the section for academic schools, we have a template there for how to evaluate non-devotee books. And you could use that also for television shows, movies, and so forth. And I suggest that you train the children, once they're about 10, 11 or so. Before that, you use the form yourself. Don't just give them whatever books or shows are available without discrimination. But to use this kind of form to evaluate and make sure that you're exposing them to stories that are going to be helpful for them. Now, of course, if the stories are being told by someone that you love and trust, then you get two things together, right? You get a double punch. So our second is stories. First one is? Okay. Now, the third one, it might be here. It might be here in community. And it might be here in lifestyle. I'm not so sure. I mean, what Jai Doi just said about the military as an example, I think really points to this one. Usually I get at least one or two suggestions that involve this one key. So all of us human beings have a need to have a life of meaning. We actually have to have meaning in our life. If our life isn't meaningful, if we feel that what we're doing is not meaningful, it's actually very hard to be motivated, isn't it? So the thing I especially studied at the doctoral level was job motivation and satisfaction. And if you look at any studies of what motivates people and what makes people happy in what they do, it's having a sense of meaning. Now, then the question is naturally arises, what do we mean by meaning? What does meaning mean? So according to our Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta, what is totally meaningful is when I am making a contribution that is really me. I'm making a contribution according to my nature. I'm doing something that uses the greatest expression of myself, not just something that anybody else could do. There is something special that I have to offer by virtue of being me. And as was mentioned, I'm doing it for something greater than myself. I'm inspired by a greater cause. So if I'm doing something that's a high expression of myself, but I'm doing it just for myself, that's not as meaningful. Or if I'm working for a greater cause, but I'm doing something that doesn't really use my talents and my nature and my personality that anybody could do, that's not as meaningful. The personality we have right now is not our eternal personality. Just like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he's a nice little shy Manjari Gopi in the spiritual world, and here he's a lion guru. You understand? Just like people now who are women, they may be cowherd boys. People now who are men, they may be gopis. And the particular nature and personality that we're manifesting in this life is a costume. It's not our eternal nature. But still, Krishna is saying that whatever nature we have, first of all, he says we must act according to it. He says you're not able to not do your nature. It will manifest anyway. And then he also says we should do it for him. Yes, this is a very important point of the Bhagavad-Gita. We have a nature. We can't deny our nature, and we should do that for Krishna. Now, even for materialistic people, according to psychological studies, if someone is doing something that they really love to do, that is an expression of themselves, and they're doing that for a higher cause, they will feel very happy. In fact, they will often feel so happy that they become fully absorbed in that work and forget everything else. Psychologically, that's called a state of flow. It's almost like a kind of samadhi, where you lose awareness of space and time, isn't it? Haven't you done something that you really loved for a higher purpose and you're so absorbed in it, it's like, oh my God, I miss prasadam, right? Or, I don't want to go to sleep, I don't want to go to sleep. You regretfully go to sleep, isn't it? Right? Because you're feeling so absorbed and so happy. Now, on the material level, no one is able to offer actual meaning. Because first of all, the way we act in this world is not our true self. And second of all, if the higher cause is not spiritual, if the higher cause is not for God, then it's not really a higher cause at all. You know, it's still something temporary, it's something illusory. Just recently I was hearing Radhanath Maharaj speak in London, and he was talking about the song Kamala Dala Dala Jeevana Talamala, that our life is like a drop of water on a lily or lotus petal leaf. And he says when the drop of water falls off the leaf, it doesn't leave a trace. And it was like, whoa. You know, how meaningful is what we do in this world on a material level? So I ask people all the time, how many of you know all the names of your great-great-grandparents? Anyone here know all the names of their great-great-grandparents? So this means that our great-great-grandchildren will not know our names. That's the grandchildren of our grandchildren. Huh? The grandchildren of our grandchildren. They will not know our names. What to speak of what we've done. All this meaningful things that we've done. They will not know. I mean, unless we become very famous, and then maybe a couple thousand years, people will be tortured by memorizing our names for their exams. You know? But these things pass away, just like, what's his name? Kukudmi? Who's Revati's father? Kukudmi? Is that his name? Who went to see Lord Brahma about a husband for his daughter. It's in the 9th canto. And he's waiting for Lord Brahma to finish listening to some music. And then Lord Brahma laughs and he said, everyone you consider to marry your daughter, their sons, grandsons, great-great-great-grandsons, no one remembers their names, they're all gone. He said, but Balaram is eternal, he's still existing. So on the material level, what we do is not significant, ultimately. It really isn't. And therefore, materialistic people cannot offer others something that's truly meaningful. This is why if you're doing materialistic things, even if you think they're exciting or whatever, after a while you say, is that it? Right? Is that it? And this is why people who achieve the goals of the world often end up getting into intoxication and so many things, because they're like, I did something really meaningful and it wasn't meaningful. It left me empty. But we devotees, we can offer something that's genuinely meaningful, because even if we're serving according to the nature of this body, we're doing so in the mood of Jivara Swarapaya Krishnara Nityadasa, that I am Krishna's servant, and we're doing it to please Krishna, and everything we do is eternal. Isn't that amazing? It's actually eternal, whatever we do for Krishna. It doesn't get blown away by the sands of time. Now, because our desire for meaning is so strong, if there's any group or organization that can offer us meaningful service, we will want to be part of that group. We'll want to work for a company or a mission or an organization or a family or whatever that offers us an experience of meaningful service. It is really one of the most satisfying things that any living being can do. And we have the capacity of offering service that's very deeply meaningful, isn't it? Yes? So let's take a look at the quotes, and you'll see Srila Prabhupada is talking about how the children should do what the elders are doing. Now, in traditional societies, this was very normal, that the children were engaged in meaningful service from a very young age. How old was Krishna when he started taking care of the calves?
6.
No, 6 was the cows. Before he was 6, he was taking care of the calves. Yeah, 3, 4, 5 years old. Could you imagine that? At least in America, if we send out our 4-year-olds to take care of the calves, we would be arrested. You know, but it was like this. At least myself, I've only seen such practices today in Indonesia, where the 3, 4-year-old children are really doing meaningful service. But it wasn't that long ago in India that such was normal. I mean, today in India, especially for educated parents, you don't expect your children to do any meaningful service until they're 25 and they have their master's degree, isn't it? Before that, it's just study, 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 study. And I believe that this problem is very directly responsible for the increase in people playing video games. That video games gives an illusion that I am mastering something, I am, really doing something that's meaningful. And I've seen that people who have a lot of meaningful service, they may play some of these games, but they don't get very absorbed in them because they have some meaningful service in their own life. Now, it's interesting, my husband and I didn't intentionally do this for our children, but we ended up doing it circumstantially. So we ran a Gurukul in our house, and my husband ran a computer business in our house. And when you have a business in your house, things need to be done, and your children are handy. You understand? Something needs to be done, and they're there. And so you say, hey, can you help me with this? And that's what we did. We didn't intentionally say, let us give our children meaningful service from a young age. But that's what we did. And so all three of our children became expert teachers, which they all use very much in their career. Our sons really helped my husband with the computer business, which was he was a hardware business. They all know how to put together computers, take them apart, how to program. They all learned how to program by the time they were 11. They each knew how to do accounting by the time they were 12, 13. They also knew how to be a manager, how to be a leader, because we were running the school and running a business. So they knew how to take leadership roles. And I mean, it was very interesting. Our youngest son was heading up an international textile firm when he was 20, before he even had a degree. And our oldest son said that his bosses would tell him, you're a better programmer. This was before he had his undergrad. He got a job. And they said, you're a better programmer than the people with master's degrees. But how did they learn that? They learned that by doing meaningful service at a very young age. And we were engaging our children from about 4 years old. And again, we did it just because they were there and we needed it. And we asked them to help. I mean, which is, I believe, the way children were engaged in meaningful service for thousands and thousands of years. Now, I was once in a temple where there were some teenagers whose families were, a little Krishna conscious, but not really practicing. But the temple president had them take care of all the grounds. So instead of hiring people, he had the teenagers do it as a service, and they did it really expertly. And these teenagers were not from homes that were strictly practicing. And they would even come to the temple, they weren't dressed so pucka, whatever. And the temple president just said, do some meaningful service. Within 6 months, those kids wanted to get initiated, and they wanted to dedicate themselves to the society just from doing meaningful service. So I'd say by 14 at the oldest, if possible younger, if possible from age 11, if possible from age 4. Now, meaningful service does not mean that the children color pictures during the Sunday feast to get them out of the way. And it doesn't even mean they do cute little projects in their Sunday school and they stand up and say, Ramachandra was banished to the forest. He built a bridge. That's not what I mean. Or even they stand up, and the parents take pictures, and nobody cares except for the parents. And, and even the projects the kids do, the parents throw it away. That's not, that's nice. I'm not saying they shouldn't do that. But that's not necessarily really making a meaningful contribution to the community. In Mayapur, we have 3 schools, and especially one of the schools, the boys' school. Those boys are an integral part of the temple programs. The boys contribute every morning to the Mangalarti program, every single morning. And they're a main part of the elephant procession every Saturday. The other two schools, unfortunately, are not as involved. I mean, the international school, they also have some contingent for the elephant procession. But that school and those kids are a meaningful part of the community. Those kids are having an experience that they're doing meaningful service. So our third one is relationships. All right, now for this last one, I see it here with festivals, melodious kirtan, maybe Krishna's beauty, religious places, maybe lifestyle, maybe watching others who are happy and positive. I see it there kind of indirectly. Now, this fourth one is something that we all know about. We all experience it. It's very much part of all of our lives. But most of us don't think about it consciously, and we very rarely consciously employ it in training and helping others. So how many of you have a particular smell that evokes an emotional state, positive or negative? And something you smell, some spices maybe, or a kind of incense? Any of you with that? No? Okay, what about a certain food? Is there a certain food that really brings on an emotional state? We usually get at least half the people with food. What about a particular song? Particular song that you hear it and immediately an emotional state? Certain place? Any of you ever have a certain place? Certain person? This can be again positive or negative. Certain person, you just think about that person. Certain activity. Okay, so there's this relationship between certain sensory inputs. Usually the strongest are smell and sound. Between certain sensory inputs and a particular emotional state. And it happens automatically. We're exposed to this sensory input. We could even just think about it. And then we feel something, excited, curious, happy, fearful, isn't it? Yes? Now these relationships between a sensory input and a positive or negative emotional experience drive our behavior. So things that tend to evoke a positive emotional experience are things that we want to repeat. And things that evoke a negative emotional experience are things we want to avoid. Isn't it? Right? So I gave the example of my father, and my father would spend time with me every morning. So it was a repeated experience. Right? And I would call that a repeated weak experience. It wasn't dramatic, but it was happening every day. So I came to love the early morning. When I first came to the temple and said, I want to live in the ashram, and the temple president said, well, you have to get up early. I'm like, well, I've been getting up early my whole life. And it wasn't until I was in ISKCON for about maybe 35 years that I realized that not everybody liked the early morning. I just thought that the early morning was wonderful, and therefore, everybody liked it. I didn't realize that I had some personal association with that time of day. And I was speaking to one devotee who said, I don't like the early morning at all. I hate getting up early. And I was shocked. I thought, how is that possible? I just didn't think it was possible. And then I started to think about, well, why do I like the early morning? And I realized, it wasn't philosophical, it wasn't because Prabhupada said, it was because of my father. That I had an emotional connection between being up early, watching the sunrise, having it be very quiet outside, and this affectionate, playful dealings that I had with my father. So that's an example of a repeated weak experience. Every time you go to your grandma's house, she makes a certain kind of dosha, and you love your grandma, and so whenever you even think of that kind of dosha, a certain kind of spicing, and you feel all happy inside. Right? Then there's the one strong experience. So we lived in a home that was on top of a hill, and to get the mail, to get the post, you had to walk all the way down the hill, and then you had to walk all the way back up. So nobody wanted to get the mail. And it was always the thing, are you going to get the mail? Are you going to get the mail? Am I putting you to sleep? Are you going to get the mail? Who's going to get the mail today? So nobody ever wanted to get the mail. And then one time my children said to me, Mata, for the last 2 months, you've been getting the mail every day. And again, these things are unconscious. And then I said, you know, I have been. They said, why are you so excited to get the mail now? And I had to really think about it. I thought, what happened 2 months ago? And I realized we had been building a Gurukul building, and I had gone down to get the mail, and in the mailbox there was a check donation for $35,000. And I had opened this up while I was standing at the mailbox. So I had gotten a positive emotional experience that I had connected with the mailbox. So I wanted to keep going to that mailbox. You understand? Right? And this thing works negatively too. Like I know one devotee lady, very much a devotee, in her 40s, and she did not take, although she was raised in ISKCON, she's completely devoted to Krishna, spends her whole life in Krishna service, but she didn't take initiation from a Gaudiya Sampradaya. She took from another Sampradaya, and I said, why? She said, this other Sampradaya doesn't require japa. And she said, when I was growing up, my parents, my teachers would have me chant, but they would force me, and they would punish me. And she said, because every day they were forcing and punishing me, she says, I cannot even touch beads. She said, if I touch beads, I go like this. She said, I just have not been able to get myself to chant. So that's a repeated weak experience. One example I can give of a one strong experience, we used to live in Detroit in the United States, which is right by the Canadian border. And in those days in Detroit, now it's different, but in those days, there were very few Indians living in the Detroit area, and many living right across the border in Canada. So once a month, we would cross the border, and we would buy things like basmati rice and different Indian groceries. So one day when my daughter was 7, she said, can I come with you? I'm like, sure. And then we got there, she said, can I wait in the car while you go in the store? Sure. So I come out of the store, and she's hiding under the dashboard in the car. I'm like, what's the matter? She said, Mata, there was some man in the parking lot, and he was really scary looking, and I thought maybe he kidnaps little girls, and so I was hiding. And she told me for the next few years, if she just heard the word Canada, she would become afraid. Huh? So there can be one strong experience, negative or positive, or repeated weak experiences, negative or positive. Now, every society, every country, every culture tries to connect its members to that culture through positive emotional experiences. That is the main reason why in every country there's big celebrations related to that country. The Independence Day, the day of some big political figure, right? And you get the day off from work, and there's fireworks, and there's special food, and it's a big celebration, so that you're connecting this positive emotional experience with your country, with your patriotism. Or if you have a family that eats meals together regularly, and if they're pleasant meals. So if the food is tasty and the family is loving, then you're going to get this positive emotional experience related to being a member of your family. Obviously, if you get together with your family regularly and everybody's arguing, then it's going to be a negative emotional experience. So, you know, we have a regulation, an offense, that one should not chastise others in front of the deity. So I'm sure one of the reasons is that the deities don't like to hear us shouting. We don't like to hear people shouting. But I believe another reason is so that people will not develop negative emotional experiences connected with the deity and the temple room and spiritual practices. So if you have a place in your home or the temple that you go to, you want to keep that an area of positive emotional experiences. if you have to correct your children, best not to do it there. And best not to do it at that time. So you have your sadhana time, best to wait till later. Oh, this morning you were doing this. Now let's say you have to correct them then. So you're having your, Shastra reading time and with your children, and one child takes the Bhagavatam and hits his brother over the head with it. But at least take him out of that space. Go into another place to do the correction. And we should be very careful how we treat the children and everybody in our temple rooms, right? I've seen so many times, as soon as the children make noise, people are like, get out, get out, get out, get out, get out. Or even before the children make noise, they just see the children. They don't even give them a chance, Get that child out of here, get that child out of here, get that. And so the whole child's life, they're hearing, get out, get out, get out, get out. And one day they grow up and say, okay, I'm leaving. So how we treat the children in the temple, whether we welcome them. Yes, children are noisy and dirty and not sense-controlled. If they're not, they're probably sick, right? It's their dharma to make noise and run around. It's just what they do. So to welcome them in the temple, and so have the temple a welcoming, a positive emotional experience for them, and the same with our own sadhana, to be very, very careful. And also, one thing I found in my research is that one of the main things that the adults who were born in the movement remembered as their key experiences that made them decide to commit to Krishna consciousness were some of the big positive emotional experiences. It was kind of sad for me because I was a Gurukul teacher and I had put so much energy into the daily curriculum. But most of these young adults didn't talk about that. They talked about, the time Indradyumna Swami took us out on Harinam, or the time we did this drama, or something like that. So not only to have these ongoing weaker experiences on a daily basis with Krishna consciousness, but to provide facility for the children to have strong, positive emotional experiences. I think about, say, Indradyumna Swami's Poland tour. A lot of kids go there, and from that alone decide they want to take up Krishna consciousness. So you have Maharaj himself has a very loving relationship with a lot of the youth. So you have that relationship of love and trust. They're doing meaningful service. Yes, a lot of the entertainment is about stories, and they're getting a very positive emotional experience. Right? There's the same principle operates with like the youth bus tours, where they go from temple to temple, they do meaningful service, they form good love and trust relationships, right? And they're getting a positive emotional experience. So the fourth one is? Oh, you can do better than that. One more time. And there you go. Any one of those is so strong that it can make us decide, yes, this is what I want to do. And if that stuff is happening outside of Krishna consciousness, then people will gravitate towards that. And as you can see, that these keys apply not only in the dealings between adults and children, but with devotees in general. So, okay, we do have another program tonight, and we have a number of things we need to do today, so I don't have a whole lot of time here. Oh, do we have our books here? So we should say that before we ask for some questions. So of our 3 books, one of them is sold out, and I think we just have a few copies of the others. So you can just, you want to give me them? I can show them up here. So we have 2 big books here that if you'd like to have a copy after the class, or if you need to leave early, you can get one from Nanda Gopal Jivan. So this is a short book about chanting Hare Krishna, how to chant without offense. Very light, easy reading. And this one is a story. It's a Krishna conscious novel, a fictional story of how to attain Krishna prema. And it's based on the metaphors of Jad Bharat in the 5th canto, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Madhya 19 and 20, and also Raghunath Das Goswami's Manashiksha. Now, we've sold out of Manashiksha, but there's some Manashikshas in the bookshop, isn't there? I saw Manashikshas in the bookshop at the Glory of India temple, at least. So there we have. Do you have some with you here? No, none here, but they're in the bookshop. So anyway, if you want to get these, also this storybook, I wrote it in language for the general public. So it's the kind of book you can give as a gift if you have non-devotee friends, families, co-workers. It's something that can really be shared with them. At the same time, the devotee youth have liked it, and I've even gotten emails from sannyasis telling me they were crying reading it. So I just keep this up here. Anyway, so if you want to get a copy, we have just a few copies here, and you can pick them up at the end, and I'm happy to sign them. I'll take 15 minutes if anybody has any questions, and please keep to this general topic about raising children and these points. Yes.
We should give meaningful service.
Hare Krishna Mataji, he said we should give meaningful service to our children, and that meaningful service should be connected with the nature of the child. So
correct.
So how do we identify what is the nature of the child?
Oh, I really like that question. How do you identify someone's nature? Someone's nature is something they cannot not do. Someone's nature is something they cannot not do. You're going to do your nature whether other people like it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you get paid for it or not, whether you got asked to do it or not, and whether you do it nicely or not. So one way you can tell your child's nature is by what you find annoying. What doesn't go away. That regardless of any instruction, rewards, punishment, they still do it. Right? So I'll give you a few examples. So one example is myself. So I started going to preschool when I was 3, and the teacher made a complaint to my parents. And my parents would bring up this complaint over and over again when I was growing up. You're doing it again. Stop it. You're doing it again. What complaint do you think the teacher made about me?
You were talkative in class.
I was talking, yeah. But it was just 3-year-olds, it's a play school. It wasn't like a sitting down at your desk kind of school when you're 3. Yes?
Something what you love doing.
And what do you think I love doing? What do you think I love doing? Teaching. So what do you think I was doing when I was 3? I was trying to be an assistant teacher, yes. I was probably trying to be the teacher, actually. So the teacher says, your daughter, she's not willing to be a student. She's always coming up to us and telling. And, my teacher thought this was very bad. And my parents thought this was very bad. And the whole time I was growing up, I would hear, "You're doing it again, you're teaching. Stop it." It wasn't until I was 24 when I met my godsister Jyotir Mai, and she trained me in the attitude and the skills of teaching, that I discovered I'm a teacher. So I know one devotee, these are true stories. I know one devotee that the whole time he was growing up, his parents and his brothers and sisters would always say, "Mind your own business." Because he would never be able to pay attention to what he was doing, but he always knew what everybody else was doing. So he was always aware of what everybody else was doing, and he could never focus on his own work. And he was also always trying to tell people how to do things better. And so every day, 10, 15 times a day, he was heard, "Mind your own business, mind your own business. Stop telling people what to do. Stop telling..." And he couldn't stop. And when I was there, I said to them, he's a leader. He's a manager. Right? And then he went on the Poland tour, and he was managing the stage show, and I heard from many people there, he was the most valuable person on the tour. I saw that, where was I recently? It's hard for me to always remember where I was. I can picture the room, but I can't remember the country I was in. Anyway, I was somewhere in the world. And some people were there with little children. And there was this little girl. She couldn't have been more than 4. And she was telling all the other little children what to do. She was telling them how to sit, and she was telling everything. And we were talking about nature, and I said to the parents, I said, do you correct her for this? And they said, oh yeah, it's really bad. And then I asked them, I said, well, what do you do? Oh, well, I lead this yatra, and I mean, both of them, both the mother and the father, were leaders. Why are you surprised that your daughter is a leader? He said, instead of trying her to stop, you should teach her how to do it. Right? Or I know another person, he's growing up, he was always told just the opposite. So he was always told, why don't you notice what's going on around you? You're so absorbed in what you're doing, and your baby sister's crying, and you don't even notice. Why do I always have to tell you, whatever you're reading, whatever you're working on, that's just your full absorption? Can't you pay attention to anything else other than yourself? What do you think he became? A scientist. Or I know another kid, you know, the parents were always saying, why are you such a show-off? Why do you always want to be in the center? Everybody should look at you. What do you think she became? An actress, yes. So the child's nature is what they cannot not do. And if it's not engaged properly, it will come out improperly. But it will manifest. Your child's nature is manifesting by this, certainly by the time they're 3 or 4. In some way, it's coming out. And if the child isn't given direction how to use that nature in a positive way, it will come out in a negative way. Then you could also obviously tell as the child grows up what kind of subjects that they find interesting, how they function, how they work. I mean, nature is a very complex topic. I have that as a topic of another seminar, so I'm not going to get that much into it. Obviously, you can also tell by a person's chart. I mean, there's many ways of understanding people's personality and people's nature, but it's something that we should be able to observe from a fairly young age. Aspects of a person's nature. Is a person more people-oriented or task-oriented? Are they more fast-paced or are they more slow-paced? Are they more cautious or do they more love a challenge? Are they more risk-takers? You know? Like as a teacher, if I'd say to my students, okay guys, this is a really easy assignment. We've done things like this before. So 60% of the kids would go, great. And 40% would say, then why bother? And the other way, if I said, okay, this is something new, it's a little difficult, it's a little challenging, so 60% of the kids would go, well, I don't even want to try. And 40% would say, yes! So that's a question of nature, right? So who do you want managing the accounting, the cautious people or the risk-taking people? Cautious people. Who do you want to go preach in China and Saudi Arabia? The risk-taking people. So one isn't better than the other, but especially if a child's quite different from us. You know, if I'm a high risk-taking, challenge-seeking person, and I have a very cautious child, I may think that that's bad. Or vice versa. If I'm a very cautious person and I have a risk-taking child, I may try to stop that. So you can't stop it. You can channel it. Excellent, excellent question. Thank you very much for asking that. But that is a very deep topic. It's really, you know, I took 10 minutes or 8 minutes. It's not something I can really explain in 8 minutes. Just giving you some idea, but this is something that to go very deep into. And as I say, I have other seminars just, actually more than one, just on this topic. Yes, Prabhu.
Raji, this is again about the nature. This is again about the nature. The question is, does the nature gets molded according to circumstances or it just gets carried?
Is the nature molded according to circumstances or does it get carried?
Is it something like in some circumstances when I'm able to do something, I got to know that this is also my nature, I like doing it? Or just it is just carried and one unveil it?
So again, I don't really have time to do this. This takes at least 30 to 40 minutes to really do this with the group. But you could think about like cautious, you could be cautious in Tamagun, Rajagun, Sattvagun, or you could be cautious in Bhakti. You could be a risk taker in Tamagun, Rajagun, Sattvagun, or you could be a risk taker in Bhakti. Right? If you're a risk taker in Tamagun, maybe you take dangerous drugs, or you do things that are criminal. If you're a risk taker in Rajagun, maybe you invest in things that are a little, uncertain. Or maybe you do charity work in a war zone, if you're a risk taker in Rajagun. If you're a risk taker in Sattvagun, maybe you will take up a spiritual discipline that is different from that of your family and your society. And as we said, like a risk taker in Bhakti, you might preach and Soddin in Bhakti. That is entirely due to association and nurture. And in that sense, Prabhupada says that children are like soft dough, that they don't have something fixed and you can change them as you like. So that's our job, is to find the child's inherent nature and show them how to be the best of themselves. Now there's a big debate, how much is nature, how much is nurture? It's a huge debate. I don't expect that any of us are going to be able to answer that. But we do know that children have some sort of fixed nature. I mean, that was the whole science, which I think today is not very operative, of Garbhadan Samskar, where you could, call a child of a certain nature. We don't really have that science. But then how does it develop? Thank you. How does it develop is according to nurture, isn't it? So if you have a child who's a leader, that child's going to be a leader. But what are they going to be a leader of? You understand? What are they going to lead? How are they going to lead? They're going to lead. But how? What will be their mode of leadership? What will be their leadership style? How will they deal with other people? For what purpose will they lead? That's completely due to association and training. But the basic nature is there. I mean, you can repress it. I think, I know that unfortunately, among the Indian community, both in India and in the diaspora, there's a tendency to think there's only about 3 or 4 acceptable occupations in life. And so this is trying to force people to act contrary to their nature out of fear of poverty. The people are just looking at the careers that pay the best and just pushing their kids into those. And I meet many people who they'll say, I'm not doing what I love. I'm not doing my nature. I did it under family pressure, family insistence, but I don't like it. And then they get to be in their 50s and say, now I think I'm going to be a teacher, or now I think I'm going to be a musician. But, when they were 20, if they said to their parents, I want to be a teacher, their parents practically threatened to commit suicide. So this is a real shame that in the country of the Bhagavad-Gita, where Krishna makes this so clear, that somehow this is not understood, that we have a particular nature. Okay, I think we will end here. Sorry, I have a very busy schedule here in Delhi, and I'm not God. I'm not able to expand myself and be in 100 places at once. I can't even be in like 3 places at once. I'm working on that mystic city, so maybe next time I come. Anyway, no, I can't do it now, so I do apologize. And we could certainly talk about these things for a week or 2, not just an hour. So I hope you found this helpful. If you're interested in the book, we have them in the back. And we also have a lot of educational materials for free download on my website. You're welcome to go and download there whatever you want. I also have links to a lot of other classes there. So I may have given another seminar that answers some of your questions that you can already find online. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
We are really thankful to you, URMILA Mataji, for giving us your precious and valuable time. And we hope that we all learn and try to implement whatever we have learned in this session. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Thank you all for coming today. And we dedicated 10 to 1. Some of you guys here want to sign one of your books.